Excellent, excellent. So once again, would like to welcome you to our Young and Brave Mentoring Program. And like someone just reminded me, today is week 5. Excellent. You guys have been doing amazing, amazing, coming for all the sections, gleaning, and lots of things have been taught. Some good job, ladies. So today we are going to be talking about a very important topic that I believe we can all relate to. And I believe it might have happened to every one of us today, because I believe it did happen to me today. So we're going to be talking about stress management techniques. I know we are, yeah, Susie is shaking her head, of course. She can relate.
The best thing.
Yeah. You ring the bell, right?
Yeah.
We can all relate. Awesome. So the question now is, what is stress? Stress is a normal psychological and physical reaction to the demands of life. A small amount of stress can be good because it motivates us to perform well. But then when you now have multiple challenges, especially as women, and of course, if you have kids, so you're going to be dealing with the kids, you're going to be dealing with your married, you're going to be dealing with your spouse, and you're going to be dealing with a career woman, you're going to be dealing with work and so many things. So multiple challenges daily, such as things I've just mentioned, or maybe even the traffic. Maybe you're driving to work and there's so much traffic, or you might be meeting your deadline at work, can push you beyond your ability to cope. And that is why today we want to learn how to cope with our stress. It is part of being human. And like I said, it can motivate you to get things done. Even high stress from serious illness, or maybe you lost a loved one, or maybe a painful event that happened to you some years back or in life. All those things can cause a lot of stress. If you're living with a high level of stress, the problem is that you're putting your entire being, your entire body at a high risk. Stress causes havoc on your emotional equilibrium, as well as your physical health. That is why we want to manage it. We want to learn how to manage it today, especially when we know that it's going to really affect our physical health. And we know we need to be physical healthy to be able to handle the challenges of life. It narrows your ability to think clearly, function effectively, and to enjoy life. Effective stress management helps you break the hold stress has on your life. And that's why we're doing the workshop today. It's because we want you to be happier, we want you to be healthier, and we want you to be more productive in life. The ultimate goal is to live a balanced life, to have a balanced life with time for work, time for your relationships, time for relaxation, time to have fun, sit down and laugh with your families, with your children, and the resilience to hold up under pressure and meet challenges head on. See, one thing is that our brain is it's hardwired. It comes hardwired with an alarm system for our protection. So what happens is that when our brain perceives a threat, it now signals to our body to release a burst of hormones, and that increases our heart rate and raises our blood pressure. And this fight to fight response actually response fuels you, or fuels I, or fuels us to be able to deal with this threat. And once the threat is gone, our body is supposed to return to this normal, relaxed state. But sometimes it doesn't. Why? Because there's always a nonstop complication of you have to move on to the next thing that we want to do. So the cycle goes on and goes on and goes on, and the alarm sometimes doesn't get shut off. Okay, and that is why stress management technique gives us a range of tools to be able to reset that alarm system. So today we have a great woman that is going to be helping us to be able to know how to reset our alarm system. She's somebody that we know very, very well. I mean, she was here the other day, a few weeks ago, to help us with our self-awareness. And she's no other lady than Mrs. Lee. So let me just read a little bit of her bio, though you already know her. She has a BSc in psychology from Ohio State University and a Master's of Christian Studies in Marriage, Family, and Community from Regent College. She has recently completed her further education and internship training requirements through the Master's of Marriage and Family Therapy program at the Trinity Western University, and is awaiting, oh no, she's not actually awaiting, she got it. I remember the last time she came, she got it. This bio was written before then, so that's why so she has it, hooray. In the meantime, she's I think she has actually completed her last term as an interim counselor at the Boredom Counseling Center. And she's passionate about helping people grow more confident in who they are and navigating their significant relationship. And that's why you see her coming here all the time. Whenever we call on her, she said, yes, I'm ready to help, because she loves to help people. She's also a part-time pastor. She's been married for 18 years to her husband, Ivan, and she's a mother of 3, 14, 12, and 9. So I think she can tell us how to handle stress, because I believe she does a handful. She's experienced it in her life. She just got her license, like I said, and she's going to be starting her own counseling practitioner very soon. Have you started it yet already?
I have, and I also just got hired to a different counseling center.
Oh, nice, nice.
That starts in the next couple weeks, so I have to figure out. Yeah, all these moving pieces all the time.
See the stress equilibrium. All right, so over to you, lady. Please tell us how to manage our stress so that we can reset our alarm system.
Okay. Thank you. Let me share. So interesting enough, I thought originally we were talking about stress and time management, but they're related. So
yes, they are. So please, hey, go ahead.
A bit of both, but
give us whatever you prepared. We're ready.
Okay. So, I guess Dr. Uday already gave us the answer, but I was thinking if we could talk a little bit about how stress shows up in your life as a bad thing or as a good thing. Like, are there any examples that you guys want to throw out? How does stress show up in your lives? So,
for me, it's more of headache.
Headache? That's bad, right? Headache. Yeah. I sometimes get body aches too. When I used to get really stressed, I know, okay, I've like passed my limit, because my like feet and my hands would actually start to ache too. So sometimes some swelling, headache.
Mine's fatigue.
Fatigue, where it kind of feels like, oh, I just don't have energy to do anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard.
Your breathing.
Your breathing gets affected?
Yeah.
In what way? Is it hard to breathe? Harder?
Hard, yeah.
Okay. And then I'll have sometimes brain fog too. It's like when the stress gets higher, and that's when I most need my brain to fix things. That's when it's like the hardest for me to be able to think and figure things out. Okay, can you think of any examples of where stress can be good in your lives?
Oh, yes, I remember my son when he's stressed out. Well, I'm talking on behalf of my son. When he's stressed out, maybe he has a test. He's so stressed out that it motivates him to study. That he doesn't fail the test.
Motivated to study or do something
right
that you don't really want to do, but you're stressed enough you actually do it. Anything else?
It gets me to slow down.
Oh, okay, cool.
That's a good one.
Slow down. So it tells you something about how you're living, how to make some decisions. I'm also thinking about, anyone here like roller coasters? I don't anymore, but I used to. So sometimes the right amount of stress, brings some excitement, not bored, feel alive, something like that. Yeah. And sometimes stress, sometimes if it's the right amount, it increases my productivity. Have you guys experienced that? Like sometimes I want to be stressed, like my stress cleaning. If I'm stress cleaning the house before guests are supposed to come over, I get so much more done in 1 hour than I do when there's nobody coming. So it's kind of like the being motivated to study. Like things just,
I think I think it's stress good for body to refresh, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a warning signal. Nice.
Tell you to refresh. And if it's the right amount, it can be refreshing. Okay, cool. So I found a couple graphs to just kind of, because this is, I almost want to talk about stress as something that we want to manage, but I want to kind of salvage its reputation, so it's not such a scary thing, right? And as Dr. Uday also explains, there's good stress and there's bad stress. And I remember learning about a term called eustress, which for whatever reason, eustress versus distress is like a way to think about stress as where it's actually this good thing. Okay, so the idea is if we're thinking about like our performance, but this can also be like how alive we feel, or how, you know, just kind of our productivity, how engaged we are in life. If we have no stress, we actually tend to be bored. So we're on this kind of like my left-hand side, right? We're bored. So if you have zero stress, there's only really one time we're going to have zero stress. I'd say even when you're sleeping. Do any of you guys have dreams where like you're also still working things out, right? Even when we're sleeping, our bodies are doing some good work. So stuff is happening. But when we are no longer alive, then there's zero stress, but then there's also zero life, right? So we don't want to be zero, like we don't want to be at zero, okay? But you're kind of very calm here, not much is going on, and we go up. And then there's a place here where it's almost like at a roller coaster, right? Like that perfect roller coaster where we feel energized and focused, work feels effortless, kind of like a flow state, and you feel good because you feel like, oh, look, I can do stuff, right? Like there's a good feeling when we have like the right amount of activity going on. But then if you keep increasing the stress and we go to like fatigue, exhaustion, ill health, and then even breakdown and burnout. And so we don't want to go down here, right? It also ends in destruction. So not good. So we want to kind of stay kind of around here, if that makes sense, in our lives, and figure out what that looks like for us. Another way that this can be looked at is, okay, so boredom. And if you've ever seen someone bored, you actually can get low, your motivation kind of can go out the window to do anything, okay? Here you're comfortable. Here you're stretched a bit, but not overstretched. Here you start to feel strain, right? And then that kind of tells, right? Some of us were saying stress is good because if we pay attention to it, it helps us to know, oh, I've got to slow down a little bit, right? So I can spend some time in comfort, and then kind of go back and forth here in life. And we are hoping we don't burn out. Okay. So I guess as we kind of just talk about strategies today, my heart is, and the thing that I've learned over the years is that I just feel like is so important, is that we are able to approach stress management and time management from an emotionally healthy place. Okay, so an emotionally healthy approach to productivity and time management keeps my heart and my sense of identity and confidence in check. So I'm always kind of thinking about these things. It keeps me from striving in a strife-filled type of anxiety-provoking and harsh punishing type of way. You know, and it keeps me running the race rightly. Like I'm running a race where maybe there's parts where I sprint, but life is more like a marathon than a sprint, right? But sometimes there's like parts where, oh, this is a good place to kind of really run faster, but then you gotta pace yourself because we want to make it to the end and we want to be able to enjoy it all the way. Okay, so don't approach productivity as in, I better do this or I'm a failure, or I better get this right or I'm worthless. But instead, if we approach productivity goals and stress and time management from this place more of peace and self-care, of like, I know I am loved and valuable, but I have untapped potential I would like to learn how to tap into and live out of more effectively. Does that make sense? So it's like, we don't want to avoid stress completely, but we don't want to like, we don't want to feel like if we're not able to kind of do more all the time, then we're somehow not good enough. We don't want to do it from that place. So that kind of relates to the first topic on self-esteem and self-awareness. Okay, so I had this epiphany like many years ago when I guess it's after I get married. And how many of you know that in a gas tank, when that gas light goes on and the gauge is at E, it's not actually quite at E? Are your car, like, have you guys seen that or experienced that? And so because I knew, oh, it's not actually empty, I would just wait until, I would let it keep going until it's like beyond the E. And then I would be so stressed out because I don't know where the gas station is. And there was one time the car actually quit on me in an intersection, but at least there was a gas station like on the other corner. So someone in my car was able to go get some gas in a can.
Oh my God.
Then when I met my husband, and then his dad was also ran an auto shop at that time, like a mechanic. He would watch me do this and watch how stressed I would get. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it to the gas station. And he would just be like, why do you wait until it's not even just at the E, but it's like beyond the E, right? Before you fill up your tank. And then one day my father-in-law, pulled me aside and he just let me know, like, did you know that if you let your gas tank go all the way like to the empty for too long, your tank actually can oxidize or something, like the metal is too exposed, and then that like isn't good for the car. And so he's just explaining to me the better way is to actually refill your tank when it gets to like a little bit below half or like quarter tank, right? Like, so they're trying to explain to me, don't let it go all the way down, which introduces unnecessary stress. But then one thing I realized is I actually lived my whole life that way, right? For whatever reason, I always felt like maybe I've got to work harder to kind of keep up with everyone. I had a heart condition when I was a teenager where I was in bed rest for about half a year. And I think from that experience, I always just felt like, I probably have to push a little bit harder than the average person to be able to do as much as the average, like to do enough or be enough. So I always thought I've got to push 110%. I'm going to fall behind. And it was not a good way to live. So this was like a wake up call for me. Okay. So just the idea that even, like that I don't have to let my tank go so low. And only I will know that. But when my tank goes low, I actually start feeling like that gas tank that's getting oxidized. Do you guys ever feel that way? I feel like I'm like creating this storm, or I don't know, like welcoming in havoc into my body and into my brain, which then affects the tone of my voice and how I speak to my kids, right? And that leads to other issues too. So I just feel like, oh, okay. So the heart of it is to grasp this idea that possibly how much we let ourselves kind of run ourselves to the ground, we don't actually necessarily have to. It doesn't mean we don't need to be productive, but maybe we can pick a different place to read that E when we go and like fill the tank. Okay, so just some kind of little mottos that I've picked up along the way. Know your limit, play within it. I think that's That might be Canada's or BC's gambling casino motto, I think. So, you know, it's a good motto for our finances, but I think it's even more important to think about when it comes to how we live our lives, how we manage our energy, how we manage our time, how we manage our relationships, right? Like to have some sense of like, if I'm getting too stretched, okay, cut, like don't let myself get too stressed, and figure out how over time to reach our goals within our limits. Does that make sense? And then the 80% rule. There was a season of my life where I just really felt like, you know, you cannot live at 110%. First of all, you don't even have 110%, right? 100% is all of what you have. So there's no 110%. And then secondly, you actually should live with a margin, right? And so this is where another habit of mine would be like to kind of schedule my day to the full. So like if you got to make it to an appointment, right? How do you make sure, how much time do you give yourself to go? And my family was always that family that was rushing. And we just never really know if we'd be there or if we would get there. But then I would meet some people whose parents taught them, if you're on time, you're late. But if you're 5 minutes early, then you're on time. And so what I learned is some people, they just plan to go early and then they wait in the car to, like, I don't know, they'll bring a book or something and they just plan it that way, right? Wherever it is they're going, they aim to be early, because then if there's traffic on the way or there's a delayed bus or something like that, it doesn't make your heart have to kind of jump, right? Like it doesn't tense everything up because you've built that margin into your life. And I realized that too, like in life, like how often have you had a plan not go according to plan? Or how often have you been going about your schedule and then all of a sudden, you know, there's an emergency here, an emergency there, right? Or all of a sudden, like you spill coffee all over your clothes. So it's kind of like at some point I had to understand, like this is part of life. So I shouldn't, and I used to get so angry and frustrated when these mishaps would happen. And then finally I realized, you know what, this is actually part of life. And it's amazing when things go perfectly according to plan. But if it doesn't, and I'm prepared for it, and I've given myself this margin, so 80% capacity seems to be like the right, for me anyway, that's what I found. If I schedule myself at 80%, then I've got room, or I've got the margin to kind of breathe and to deal with things as they come up and then kind of reset. And I don't feel like I'm running this rat race all the time, okay? So it's really important that we spend time investing and discovering and cultivating a good, solid, sustainable self-care plan, okay? So the idea of how do you fill your tank in order to run optimally? And then have you guys heard of the principle of sharpening the saw before? No? I'm gonna see if we actually can watch this. Okay, hold on. Unfortunately, there's the ad. Okay, so sharpening the saw is just this idea that we got to have this mindset. So I'll let you watch it and then we can see. Can you hear it? Okay.
No, it's not playing yet.
No? Okay. But earlier, okay, I'm going to optimize. So there are cuter videos out there too, which have like different people talking to each other, and maybe I'll have to find some. But did you kind of catch that? It's like the lumberjack is, you know, sawing down trees, and he actually, so some stories will, or some storytellers will say, you know, he like, you know, cut down the most trees on day one, and the boss was so happy, so he's like, okay, you know, he's going to try to increase how many he does the next day. But then it's like he gets a few, he doesn't hit that target, so he's frustrated, so he has to keep, so he's just trying so hard to keep cutting down more trees than he did before, right? Or to keep up with it. But then as each day goes, he actually is cutting fewer and fewer trees, even though he's trying harder and harder, and he's so frustrated, right? But then when someone suggests to him, hey, maybe you should stop and take time and sharpen the saw, but he's like, you know what, that's not just a small process, that's like a big time consuming task, right? So he's like, I don't have time to do that, right? So but then the other man is like, but if, you know, so you guys know what will happen, right? If he doesn't stop to sharpen his saw, what's going on? The saw is becoming duller and duller, right?
Yeah.
So he's working harder and harder and harder and harder, but his productivity is going to go down and down because his tool is no longer sharp enough to do the job, right?
Mm.
So he has to stop and sharpen the saw. So this is kind of like, if we understand that, then when we get stressed and we get to that point where we think, oh, we don't have time to rest or to stop, then something, you know, hopefully some alarm bell goes on and you're like, oh, I actually better stop and sharpen my saw, whatever that means. Sometimes I'll have a really busy day and I'll forget to eat. And then for me, the example is, I better stop and actually pause and eat. And if I'm smart, I'll actually make regular eating times part of my day, right? Rather than waiting until, oh, all of a sudden it feels like I'm running on empty and I'm getting a headache, right? My biggest thing is drinking water. Oftentimes I forget to drink enough water. And when you're dehydrated, if anyone ever Googles the importance of water, you'll see how many symptoms and struggles are just because we're dehydrated. We're not drinking enough water. It's pretty crazy. Okay. Any questions so far? This good? Makes sense? So Dr. Uday also talked about like kind of caring for our system, our body's natural alarm system is the fight, flight, freeze response, also known as just understanding our nervous systems. And we have two systems. We have a system called the sympathetic nervous system, and we have a parasympathetic nervous system. And cortisol is our main stress hormone. So when I talk about stress in our bodies, I'm often thinking about cortisol levels. There's also something called adrenaline, because cortisol is made from our adrenal glands. And I'm sure there's other things going on in the body too. But if you think of cortisol as like your main stress hormone that's in your body, and it has a purpose, it's your alarm system. It's also kind of gets your blood pumping so you can be more productive for meeting a deadline when you've got a deadline. So it can be very useful, okay? And it's especially useful, say if you were out in the wild and all of a sudden you see a bear, right? If you see a bear, you better have an alarm system go on your body, right? Because you need to be able to not analyze, oh, is the bear like, you know, black or brown? Does it have like soft fur or coarse fur? You know, I wonder what the bear ate today. Well, you don't have time to think about those things. So what happens is when our fight, flight, freeze response is activated, we flip. So if this is the brain and this is the top part of our brain, the big part of our brain that thinks about things and kind of talks about things and reasons, it will flip, right? So that this part of our brain that knows how to fight, flight, freeze, like quickly react, gets engaged. And so, you know, you quickly do what you need to do. And then when the threat is gone, then you're supposed to relax, right? You're supposed to be able to calm back down and then take care of yourself and go back to normal. So our fight, flight, freeze response is really useful. But what's not good, and I bet if you're a nurse, you would know this too, right? What's not good is for it to be on all the time or for too long. Does that make sense? Like a car, again, if you need to accelerate, you know, for like 1 minute, okay, like 1 minute's even kind of long, but you don't want to accelerate for an hour straight. You're gonna burn through something, right? Something's gonna go wrong. So we need our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of our nervous system that helps us to relax, helps our bodies to know, oh, okay, like the cortisol can kind of go away. And now we can start repairing and healing our bodies, and we can rest, we can sleep, we can restore, we can, you know, kind of breathe. So we need both systems to be working. Does that make sense? We need to know how we can kind of bring us back into our parasympathetic nervous system. And then we're not afraid of our sympathetic nervous system because we know how to kind of bring it back down. That makes sense. Okay. So how many of you have heard or you have practiced some kind of grounding technique or relaxation technique, like deep breathing? Haven't done much of that. So just even deep, one of you had mentioned our breathing can get harder when we're stressed, right? Because if you need to sprint, you actually need to breathe different, right? Like if I sprint and you're using up your oxygen fast, right? But we can't live and breathe that way for very long. So what we end up doing subconsciously when we're not thinking about it, when we're stressed, is we start breathing kind of more shallow. Like maybe try shallow breathing, where you can only breathe like from up here. But what we need to do to kind of activate our parasympathetic nervous system is to breathe down here. You can't see. But like if you put your hand on your stomach, right? You want to breathe. Maybe put your hand on your stomach. Breathe in such a way that your stomach comes out farther than your chest. And see how that goes. But it takes longer, right? And you have to take deeper breaths. And so sometimes people will say, you know, to spend at least like 1 to 5 minutes or something every day practicing deep breathing. I think most athletes probably do something like that, or it's just a way to kind of engage with that part of your body that knows how to calm down and say, you know what, I'm not being threatened by a bear. I can actually sit here and take a really nice long deep breath and take a few seconds to breathe out. A deep breath in. Deep breath out. And one more time. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. I usually do at least 3. If I'm doing any other kind of exercises, I usually will also have clients do at least 3, and I'll breathe with them to kind of slow your breath down. And then what happens is, even if your mind, you know, has been stressed about stuff, your body thought you were being attacked. Now your body, your breath, which is the brain underneath the brain that's underneath our big brain, okay? That part tells your middle brain, you don't need to be in fight, flight, freeze anymore. Because look, we're safe. We have the time to take deep breaths in and out. So you're using your body to tell your brain, hey, it's okay. It's okay. I've looked around and we're actually not being chased by a bear, and we can actually calm down. And so then the parasympathetic nervous system can become reactivated. Okay. Another grounding technique that doesn't take too long to try is pressing your feet into the ground, it's like literally grounding, right? And if you're outdoors, it's even better, barefoot onto the grass. Like there's something very grounding about like connecting and feeling the ground under your feet. Okay, so take a deep breath in and out. Okay, and then keep breathing. And now press your right foot down into the ground and just kind of take your time and feel your toes kind of pressing the ground and then your heel pressing the ground. Okay, and then release. And now do the same thing with your left foot. Just kind of press it down into the ground and like notice how the ground feels against your toes and your heel. Okay, just press and then release. And then sometimes I'll do both feet. If you're sitting, you can do both feet. If you're standing, I haven't tried. I'm not sure. Right? Just kind of take a moment. It's a way of practicing mindfulness. Your feet are actually always touching the ground when you're standing or sitting, but you don't notice it, right? And then release. And so if you find like, oh, I can't get my nervous system to go down, you can spend like a minute doing a simple exercise like that. Another thing is some people, if you're not like in your office and it's odd to be pressing your hands, you can press your hands together and feel like, notice how it feels pressing your fingers together and then release. Okay. Now body scanning, you can do if you're sitting or lying down, and it's just taking the time to kind of notice how your head feels and then your shoulders, your arms, your chest, your stomach, your legs, your feet. But it would be like much slower, right? But you just kind of check in with yourself and notice, is there tension anywhere? And what does that tension need and want? But just ways to kind of slow yourself down and really notice will also activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Another version of body scanning is to systematically, as you notice your head, like, or your neck or your shoulders, you could like tense up your muscles purposely. You could try that. Like make yourself be tense, hold it for a few seconds. If it doesn't hurt, okay? If you have injuries, don't do it. And then release. And take some deep breaths. Or you can make a fist for a few seconds and then release. And you just notice like how that feels in your body, okay? Some people like this exercise is just softening the eyes. How do your eyes feel when you are stressed or overwhelmed? You guys ever noticed?
It's be like big eyes. It's open.
Oh, like you'll
Yeah.
feel like, okay. And anyone else do like this? I will be the furrowed. I look angry or something like that. Yeah. So if you notice that that's like a common symptom for you, then when you catch yourself, you're like, I need to calm down. I need to calm down. One thing you can spend a minute, like try to soften your eyes or soften your gaze. And it's not a very hard thing to do, but it's very easy to forget to kind of soften the muscles around there and how you kind of look at things. And then you can do that for like a minute or two. And then when you relook at your situation, it's almost like, you've engaged another side of you, right? Just by changing how you're using your eyes, okay? Mindfully take a brain break. This is what you've probably heard. Oh, maybe go take a walk outside if the weather is okay. Sometimes I ask people to take time and drink a glass, not like quickly, but like take time to just go get that, fill your glass with ice water if you like hot tea. That's why, for many people, self-care can look like making yourself a cup of hot tea. It's not just the tea, although the tea can have good qualities if you choose a good tea, right? But it's the act of slowing down enough to let yourself go and do these things, and taking notice and being thankful that you actually can have a glass of water, or you can have a nice cup of tea, right? And taking that time. And it just helps your body to know, I'm not in danger. I'm okay. And then you re-engage your frontal cortex so you can actually think like your best self, okay? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is another one that for some people, they need something that's more than just breathing. And so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is engaging your 5 senses, right? And it doesn't really matter what order it kind of is, but you would say to yourself, okay, look for and name 5 things I can see with my eyes. Okay, and then 4, name 4 things I can hear. Right, and then you'd stop and do that. And then 3 things I can feel, 2 things I can smell, 1 thing I can taste. And so it's just another way to kind of, I'm not in danger, but you give yourself something to do that's not too difficult, right? So a lot of different strategies. You don't, I don't do all of them. I just kind of choose 1 or 2 at any that I like, that I use to kind of bring myself down when, even though my mind, I know it's okay, but for some reason my body's still in fight or flight and I just can't calm down. So I always try to do something to bring myself back into my body and be back in the present and remember, you know what, I'm alive right now, we're okay. If we're in the middle of wartime, okay, it's a different story, right? But then it makes sense that it's like we're actually in survival mode. But when we're in peacetime and we feel like we're in survival mode all the time, then we're going to run ourselves into the ground when we don't need to, right? And we're not going to be effective. Okay. Any questions? Or no? Okay. So this is where I kind of got more, I'm going to talk more about like time management, because most of us, why do we get stressed? It might be because of conflict or something, but I think someone else will be talking about relationship stuff, right? But in our kind of day-to-day, we all have 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week, right? And how many of you have ever felt like there's just not enough time? Maybe just me. we feel like that, right? Like that's why in our modern day we get stressed, and other reasons too. But today I'm just going to focus more on how we approach managing our time. Okay, so there's one time management expert that I think he wrote a book. There used to be a video on this, but I couldn't find it anymore. Where it's pretty cool. It's this idea of not approaching time management from the perspective of managing your energy instead of just your schedule, okay? So the core problem with working longer hours is that time is a finite resource. Energy, though, is a different story. Defined in physics as the capacity to work, energy comes from 4 main well springs in human beings: the body, emotions, mind, and spirit. In each, energy can be systematically expanded and regularly renewed by establishing specific rituals, behaviors that are intentionally practiced and precisely scheduled with the goal of making them unconscious and automatic as quickly as possible. So it's this idea that if we understand, okay, we've got a body and physical energy. So if we regularly, intentionally are drinking the water that we need and eating the nutrients and the calories that we need, right? And we don't need to think about it where we're like, where you only eat because all of a sudden you're starving and your brain is, no longer functioning, but you regularly are feeding yourself what you need. And then you can optimize, right? We can tweak and we can optimize our physical energy. Or exercise, get the right amount of exercise that doesn't injure you, right? And doesn't like wear you out. then that gets our blood pumping and we're like optimal, right? We can function a little bit better this week than we did last month or something like that, right? To not take it as we're not trying to become the athlete of the year or anything like that. It's just we're trying to figure out what makes our bodies function the best that they can, like with the reasonable, in a reasonable way. That makes sense. Okay. And then our emotions will determine the quality of energy, right? Like, how are we feeling? Are we in touch with our emotions? Are we living in such a way that we're listening to our emotions to live a life that's aligned to our values and makes the most sense, right? Because when we're doing that, then we get excited about the things that we get to do. Even if it's like fighting a battle, we get excited that, like if we're taking care of our emotions and then we're more able to take care of other people's emotions, then it's not working against us. Does that make sense? And then the mind, right? So you can have emotional capacity, I'd say emotional capacity is also like relational capacity, right? If we spend time with friends, it seems to help fill our happy tank. The mind is also, to keep it sharp, we have to be using it, right? But not overusing it. And we should be using it doing things it finds intellectually stimulating, not things that discourage us or make us frustrated. We should be appreciating what our minds can do. And then as we appreciate what it can do, then we can be excited about adding to what we know and what we learn, we can be interested in things, right? And then the human spirit is the energy of meaning and purpose. If we take time to think about what's like our meaning, our purpose, a lot of people will talk about this as knowing your why. If you know why you do something, then even when you hit road bumps or you hit kind of tougher times, we have the ability to push through or even enjoy the ride, enjoy the challenges, because we know why we're doing what we're doing. Does that make sense? So it's taking that time to really connect to that bigger purpose or the bigger why that makes sense of like the mundane things of every day. Okay. Blessing, how are we on? Are we finishing at 6? Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Yes, we still have some time, maybe 6:15. How much more time do you need?
I just have 2 slides. So
Oh, go ahead.
do
Finish it up.
you guys
Right.
want it? So it's one on time management and one on just staying focused. So
Yeah, we're good.
I can maybe put these links too. So this is another cool kind of video. So if you want to cut and paste it from the link from the chat. It's big rocks first. So my approach to time management, I use this paper planner. I can't get away from my paper planner. It's really bad, okay? But 2 pages a day. But what I like about it is there's a place to put my task list, okay? And so I make my to-do list kind of every day. And then I even have a to-do list. You can put it on a Post-it. Sometimes I use Post-its because then I can move it from day to day. Like certain tasks I might do another day. But then I take time and I rank them as big rocks, medium rocks, and small rocks. Okay. So big rocks, medium rocks, and small rocks can be like sand. So if you imagine a bottle or a jar, okay, let's take a jar, and you have pile of sand, and then you have not a pile, but you've got sand, you've got little rocks, and you've got big rocks. If you pour the sand in first and fill it up, and then maybe you can get some of the little rocks in, there's no room for the big rocks. So you can kind of maybe watch the video later. However, if it's empty and you put the big rocks in first, and then you put the medium rocks in, they can kind of go through the cracks, then you actually can still pour quite a bit of sand into the jar. Does that make sense?
Mm.
So it's like if we take that extra like 5 minutes, it's kind of like sharpening the saw. And we take the time, if we've taken the time to know what our values are, or at least even for today, what's important to me today? what's most important to me today? And then I pick those big rocks, which on my list, I'll rank them A. Okay. Then it doesn't mean I'm going to do all the big rocks, but I kind of choose, okay, you know what, this one's really important to me today. I put that one in first. Then I pick which medium rocks kind of need to go in, right? Usually we do need to eat and things like that. And then small rocks might be all those little tasks that can eat up all of our time and it's never really done. And but really, like if we kind of fill it in here and like in between our big things, then you feel accomplished at the end of the day, not like you did all these things, but you're still so frustrated because you never got to the thing that was most important to you. Does that make sense? So it's just taking that time to kind of rank things and think about it. And then the important thing is decide on when and where to begin. And then you kind of get started, right? And the more that you do this, the more you start to realize, you know what? Me doing 80% where I'm not frustrated, maybe I can do 5 things. But if I try to do 8 things, then I'm super frustrated. But if I do 5, I feel really good. I'm not overwhelmed, right? Or if it's 5 things, but you're super stressed and you can do 3 things super well, maybe just do the 3 and you might find, you know what? Oh, actually, I have time and energy to do 2 more, right? So I'm always going through my list and thinking, oh, that's overwhelming. That's overwhelming. And I cut down, I slice thinner until it feels okay. Then I go do that. And then usually I find, oh, when you feel accomplished, you actually want to do more. Does that make sense? But if you always have a list of 10 and then you do like 6, 7, which is actually a lot, but you always are down on yourself because you always feel frustrated, then that's demotivating and super stressful. Okay. So the other kind of tip, there's a video here too. Double your productivity in one day with 5 simple tips. Okay. So this idea is just, in this day, we have so many things going on, but we actually, even if we're good at multitasking, which women generally are, aren't we all multitaskers, right? We still actually are more effective if we can focus on one thing at a time.
You are currently.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, that was me. I just clicked on the link.
Okay,
I was
so
trying to see the link.
one thing at a time. And it can be a little bit hard, maybe not for you guys, but for some reason for me, it was really hard to actually like accept this truth, this idea, because I just felt like who has the luxury of not multitasking? Okay, but if we can have our big list and then kind of decide, okay, I want to do all these things today, but if we can hyper focus on one thing at a time, then you don't end up with like 5 things not finished, right? You actually end up with finished and then finished, then finished. Okay, so the strategies in the video are summarized as eliminating distractions. Sometimes that means like the TV too, or you figure out what you can do that kind of manages your stress, but doesn't distract you. Like sometimes I can listen to music, but sometimes it distracts me. Or sometimes I can have the TV running and sometimes I find actually I'm stopping for like 10, 20 minutes at a time, right? Get organized. So sometimes taking that time to organize your desk or whatever it is that you're using, you take time to organize it. If it's, it can just help kind of, doesn't mean if you see my office, it's so not organized, but it's organized. The things I need, I keep those things organized, okay? Plan your day in advance. It's kind of the sharpening the saw, taking the time to make a list if that helps you, or a mental list is fine. Turning off the internet, which is really hard in this day and age because it's a source of constant distraction, and email, Facebook. So what I've heard people do is they'll set aside specific times in the day where they do look at the internet and get all their internet things done. I haven't totally figured out a way. I just mentally am always thinking, okay, if I've got things to do, really try to focus on one thing at a time, okay? And stop multitasking on important tasks, because it's like turning on multiple dials in your brain. And even though sometimes can be fun to do that, but just realizing if it's something really important and it's not getting done and we find our stress levels rising, then probably we need to just tackle one at a time. That makes sense, because that's just how sometimes we can do it and then sometimes we can't, and we got to pay attention to our bodies. Okay. So that's all that I have for today. So hopefully there's some tips or tricks in there that are helpful to you. Are there any questions anyone has?
I'm going to stop recording for the questions.
Okay.